Guys, as you guys may know, Marvin Vettori, he just broke the news that Costa is overweight and he probably isn't going to make the middleweight limit of 186 pounds. It's not actually 185, it's 186 because you're allowed 1 pound over for non-title fights. Now, you see the problem with this is that why is Costa being so unprofessional, It just seems that Costa's not taking his MMA career very seriously at this point, probably because of a pay dispute with Dana White. He saw how much the YouTubers were making in their last few fights. He saw how much Jake Paul was making, and he saw that he was kind of being underpaid a little bit and kind of being overlooked, and he wanted a better contract. But coming off his last fight and coming off that horrendous performance in that title fight against Israel Adesanya, I kind of agree with the boss, Dana White, that he shouldn't really be asking for too much of a pay rise if your last performance was that terrible. Now, the fact that he got knocked out by Israel in his last fight, as you guys may know, what does this tell us MMA fans about Paulo Costa? The general consensus, what everybody's saying right now, seems to be that Costa is very unprofessional. He's definitely taking someone else's opportunity away from them, because you know how many other fighters in the UFC, on the UFC roster in the middleweight division, would love to fight in a main event fight? Do you know how many fighters would love to fight in a main event fight? Fucking damn. How to get to the power. Do you know how many other fighters would love to fight in a main event spot though? Fucking dude, the entire UFC roster would love to fight on a main event. But in the middleweight division, there's so many different contenders that want this opportunity. So he's kind of fucking this up for other fighters. He's fucking it up for Marvin Vettori. I mean, look at how Marvin Vettori has carried himself as a professional. Always comes in weight, always shows up on time, always shows up to fight. We all know his attitude is a little bit off, but he's a fighter. He's crazy. I mean, you have to be crazy to go into a fucking steel cage in your underwear, half naked, and fighting in front of the whole world. Of course, you're gonna be a little bit crazy. So, he's kind of delusional in terms of his fighting style against Israel. He did lose that fight, but he feels that he won the fight, which is kind of crazy. But I guess that's a mental thing. Like he has to tell himself mentally that he's better than Israel so that he can go to sleep at night. Because if he feels that he's not better than him and Israel is just better than him, then it's like, okay, what do I do now? What am I working towards? Like, what am I fighting for? What am I making all these fights for? Am I just happy being a contender? Or am I just gonna go in there and try and win? So, considering all of those things, it seems to me that Vettori is definitely taking this fight seriously. Very seriously. He takes every fight seriously. But this fight with Costa, I mean, it's crazy to me. Like, why is Costa wanting to make a catch? Now, you see, the thing is, there's a couple things to consider here. With a catch weight, this is how it generally works. So, before the fight is announced, and when the contract is being negotiated, and before the training camp, that's when you sign on the dotted line and say, okay, maybe I want to catch weight for this fight, not 185. Then I believe there's no 30% to the opponent, because that has already been predetermined. Now, if you agree and sign on the dotted line for 185, then you have to make 185. If you don't make 185, then you pay 30% to your opponent. So, looking at this situation, Marvin Vettori definitely looks and seems like he's going to make 185 on dot. He's a very professional fighter, very professional guy, fights at the highest level, an athlete at the highest level. So, it's crazy how he was making fun of Costa's drinking antics before the fight. He was like, an athlete at this level is drinking wine the day before a fight? Very unprofessional. He was like, why don't you meditate or something like that? Like, why are you drinking wine before your fight? So, I kind of agree. I see it. It's like so unprofessional. And now he's coming in overweight for the next fight. So, unprofessional. But Costa, very dangerous opponent. So there's a lot of things to think about here. So many different things that can be detrimental in the fight, because considering the 195, so they agreed to the catch weight of 195 verbally on interview on air, so that makes it looks like and seems that the fight's gonna be at 195. I mean, Costa definitely looks and seems like he's overweight. He looks bigger than he is. He looks bigger, and he looks like he's over 200 pounds. So is he going to make the weight? Is he going to be 185? Imagine Costa actually fucking makes it and becomes 185. And he actually makes it to like 185. Imagine that actually happens, dude. Fuck. Imagine he's trolling all of us and he actually weighs in at 185. But then what would be the point? I mean, it would be brilliant tactic. More media, more views, more eyeballs on the fight, more pay-per-view. No, I say it's not a pay-per-view fight. It's a fight night. But if there's more eyeballs, then that means that Dana's gonna look at the numbers and he's gonna be like, okay, this fight did pretty good numbers, so maybe then we're gonna look at the title fight. So, maybe Costa's playing chess here a little bit. Maybe he's trying to. And maybe he's actually going to make the weight. You never know, because he was 40 pounds overweight for the Israel Adesanya fight, and he made 185. So a lot of things to consider. What do I think is going to happen here? Now, what was I going to say about the detrimental part? It's very detrimental for Marvin Vettori, because Vettori is in shape and he's on weight. He's on his way to making 185. So all things considered with that, if the fight is at a catch weight of 195, I believe that Vettori will be at a disadvantage, because he's been training and trying to drop the weight systematically all throughout training camp and aiming for 185. Now, if he fights at 195, that's a weight that he's probably not that used to fighting at. He's used to fighting at 185. So coming in a little bit heavier may take a little bit of a toll on his fighting ability and his gas tank. So maybe that's going to favor Paulo Costa in the early rounds, and Costa may get the knockout. And if Costa wins that fight and he had the weight advantage, I don't understand why Vettori's taking this fight, to be honest. I think that he shouldn't take this fight if it's at 205 pounds or 205 pounds. What the fuck? Is this a fight at light heavyweight? This is a 185 fight. This is a 185 middleweight title, not a title, but it's a middleweight contender fight. If they fight at 195, then that doesn't make any sense for this to be a contender fight, because the winner's not going to get a title shot. The winner's not even going to get a title shot after this fight or the next fight, because this fight means nothing for 185 if the fight comes in at 195. So it's a lot of things to consider. Does Marvin Vettori really want to fight him? Of course, where are they going to find an opponent? Maybe they can find Kevin Holland. He might come in at short notice and make this fight happen. So I think Kevin Holland should step in and fight this dude. Get rid of Costa. He's not professional. He can't make 185. If he doesn't make 185, then what's the point of this? What was the point of calling this a contender fight? What the fuck is the point? It's not a contender fight. It's a 195 contender, but there's no title at 195. There's no belt. There's nothing. The catch weight typically gets negotiated before the fight, so very unprofessional. But I would still love to see this fight. So the fight happens at 195. I'm still gonna watch the fight. It's not like I'm not gonna watch the fight. I'm 100% gonna watch the fight. So I mean, it seems concerning. I'm not sure if that fight's actually gonna happen. It seems like it will. 195 seems like a good fight, and it's interesting, and I'm interested to see that fight. Like, I'm really entertained. I was really entertained with that interview where Marvin Vettori and Costa were talking shit. I was entertained. I was very entertained there. So. I'm looking forward to this fight, and let's see what happens.